The coffee was still warm when my world ended. I should have known something was wrong when Clara didn't immediately start her morning lecture about leaving wood shavings on my work boots. Instead, she sat at our kitchen table, staring at her phone like it contained the secrets of the universe, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling against the screen. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. We need to talk, John. 4 words. That's all it took to turn my Tuesday morning from mundane to catastrophic. I set down my mug, the one Mia had given me for Father's Day 3 years ago, back when she still pretended to tolerate me, and waited for whatever fresh hell my 17-year-old stepdaughter had cooked up this time. Clara's face had that pinched look she got when discussing anything related to my existence. After 8 years of marriage, I'd learned to read her expressions like a weather forecast. This particular storm front suggested Category 5 destruction. Mia came to me last night, Clara began, her voice steady but cold. She told me something that I can't even process. I leaned against the counter, my carpenter's hands automatically reaching for the familiar comfort of my tool belt before remembering I was still in my pajamas. What did she tell you? She said you've been... Clara's composure cracked slightly. She said you've been inappropriate with her, that you got her pregnant. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at my wife's face and watch as every trace of the woman who'd once loved me disappeared behind a wall of disgust and betrayal. You can't be serious, I finally managed. Clara, you know me. You know I would never... Do I? She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor I'd installed myself 2 summers ago. Because right now, looking at you, I'm not sure I know you at all. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in like a vice. This was the same room where we'd shared countless meals, where Clara used to laugh at my terrible jokes, where I'd taught Mia how to make pancakes when she was 10 and still thought I hung the moon. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was the defendant facing a jury of one. Clara, listen to me. I stepped toward her, but she backed away like I was contaminated. I have never, not once, touched Mia inappropriately. I've never even been alone with her for more than 5 minutes at a time. You know this. You've always made sure of it. That last part slipped out before I could stop it, but it was true. Clara had always been protective of Mia, suspicious of any man in her daughter's life. Even me, her husband, was kept at arm's length when it came to parenting decisions. I was allowed to provide financial support and fix things around the house, but actual fatherhood, that was off limits. She has details, John. Clara's voice was getting stronger, more confident, like she was convincing herself as much as me. She knows things, about your schedule, about when I'm at work. What things? What could she possibly know that would make you believe this insanity? Clara pulled out her phone and read from it like she was delivering a prepared statement. She said you've been coming to her room at night when I'm working late. She said you told her that if she ever said anything, no one would believe her because you're the one paying for her school, her car, her college fund. Every word was like a physical blow. The worst part wasn't just the accusation, it was how perfectly crafted it was. Mia had always been smart, but this level of calculated destruction was something new, even for her. And you believe her, I said. It wasn't a question. She's my daughter. And I'm your husband. Clara's laugh was bitter and sharp. Are you? Because lately it feels like you're just the guy who lives here and pays the bills. That stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Our marriage had been rocky for months, maybe years. The passion had died somewhere between my failed contracting business and Clara's promotion to senior management at Coastal Insurance. We'd become roommates who occasionally shared a bed and split the mortgage. But this was something else entirely. I want you out, Clara said quietly. Pack your things and go. Today. Clara, please. Just think about this logically. When would I have had the opportunity? You track my schedule better than the FBI. I'm either working, here with you, or dead asleep. There's no time for me to be sneaking around molesting anyone, let alone your daughter. Don't. Her voice turned sharp. Don't you dare try to logic your way out of this. My daughter came to me crying, terrified, and told me that her stepfather, the man I trusted, the man I married, has been abusing her. And your response is to give me your alibi? I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think of something, anything, that would make her listen. Where is she now? Let me talk to her. Let me ask her to explain exactly when these things supposedly happened. Absolutely not. She's at my mother's house, and she's never going to be alone with you again. The finality in her voice was terrifying. This wasn't a discussion or even an argument. This was a sentencing. I'm calling my brothers, Clara continued, already dialing. They're going to come over and make sure you leave peacefully. Tommy and Rick, Clara's younger brothers, both built like linebackers and blessed with the family tradition of solving problems with their fists first and questions later. They'd never liked me anyway, the college dropout who'd stolen their precious sister away from her upper-middle-class destiny. Clara, don't do this. Don't call them. Let's just talk. You and me. We can figure this out. But she was already speaking into the phone. Tommy? It's me. I need you and Rick to come over right now. John needs to leave, and I don't think he's going to go quietly. She hung up and looked at me with something that might have been pity if it hadn't been mixed with so much contempt. You have 30 minutes to pack whatever you can carry. Anything else we'll deal with later, through lawyers. Lawyers? The word came out as a croak. Clara, you're talking about lawyers. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Mia wants to press charges. The only reason she hasn't called the police yet is because I asked her to wait until you were gone. The room started spinning. Press charges, police. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the end of everything. My reputation, my business, my freedom. In a town the size of Millfield, an accusation like this would follow me forever, true or not. Why? I asked, and I wasn't sure if I was talking to Clara or to the universe in general. Why would she do this? What did I ever do to make her hate me this much? Clara's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with. Maybe that's something you should have thought about before you decided to. I didn't do anything. The words exploded out of me, louder than I'd intended. I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten her. I didn't do any of the things she's accusing me of. I've been nothing but respectful to that girl since the day I met her, even when she's been a complete nightmare to live with. A nightmare? Clara's momentary softness vanished. She's a teenager, John. She's supposed to be difficult. But apparently you found your own way to deal with that. The sound of truck engines in the driveway cut off my response. Tommy and Rick had arrived right on schedule. I could hear their heavy boots on the front porch, the familiar sound of the screen door slamming shut. Clara? Tommy's voice boomed through the house. Where is he? Kitchen, she called back, never taking her eyes off me. They appeared in the doorway like matching bookends of barely contained violence. Tommy, the older one, was wearing his work clothes from the shipyard, jeans and a flannel shirt that barely contained his massive shoulders. Rick was in his police uniform, which made the whole situation infinitely worse. Hey there, Johnny boy, Tommy said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Heard you've been misbehaving. This is between me and Clara, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You two don't need to be here. Rick stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. Actually, we do. See? When someone hurts our family, it becomes our business real quick. I didn't hurt anyone. That's not what Mia says, Tommy replied, and that little girl has never lied to us about anything important. Little girl. Mia was 17, nearly 18, and had been manipulating adults since she could talk. But to her uncles, she was still the sweet child who used to beg for piggyback rides and ice cream. They couldn't see what she'd become, or maybe they just didn't want to. Look, I said, raising my hands in what I hoped was a non-threatening gesture. I know how this looks, but if you just give me a chance to explain... Tommy's fist caught me in the stomach before I could finish the sentence. I doubled over, gasping, and Rick grabbed my arms from behind. Here's how this is going to work, Tommy said conversationally, like he was explaining how to change a tire. You're going to go upstairs, pack a bag, and get the hell out of our sister's house. You're going to do it quietly, without making a scene, and without upsetting Clara any more than you already have. And if I refuse? Rick's grip tightened on my arms. Then we'll pack for you. But I don't think you'll like our packing methods. I looked over at Clara, hoping for some sign that she realized how insane this had become. But she was just standing there, arms crossed, watching her brothers manhandle her husband like it was the most natural thing in the world. 30 minutes, she said quietly. That's all you get. The next half hour was the longest of my life. I stumbled upstairs to our bedroom, former bedroom, and threw clothes into a duffel bag while Tommy and Rick watched from the doorway. Every movement was agony, not just from the punch, but from the surreal nightmare my life had become. I grabbed my tools from the basement workshop, the good ones that had belonged to my father. Tommy made a comment about how I wouldn't be needing them where I was going, but I ignored him. Whatever happened next, I'd need to work to survive. As I loaded my truck, neighbors started appearing on their porches and in their yards. Mrs. Henderson from next door was pretending to water her plants while obviously straining to hear every word. The Kowalski kids were openly staring from their front steps. By tonight, everyone in Millfield would know that John Dorsey had been thrown out of his house in disgrace. "One more thing," Rick said as I tossed my last bag into the truck bed. "Clara's filing for a restraining order this afternoon. That means you don't come back here. You don't call, you don't drive by, you don't even think about this place. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I muttered. "Good. Because if you violate that order, I'll be the one coming to arrest you. And trust me, little brother, that's not going to be pleasant for either of us." Little brother. He'd never called me that before, and the casual cruelty of it now felt like another punch to the gut. I climbed into my truck and started the engine, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Clara was standing in the doorway watching me leave. For just a moment, our eyes met, and I thought I saw something, doubt, maybe, or regret. But then Tommy said something to her, and she turned away. As I drove down Maple Street for what I knew would be the last time, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. I looked like exactly what everyone would expect a child molester to look like. Unshaven, wild-eyed, desperate, guilty. But I wasn't guilty. I was just the latest victim of Mia's games, and somehow I was going to prove it. The question was how. The Millfield Motor Lodge was the kind of place where people went to disappear, and that made it perfect for my current situation. $27 a night got you a room that smelled like cigarettes and industrial disinfectant, a bed that had seen better decades, and the absolute certainty that nobody would ask uncomfortable questions about why you were there. I'd been living in room 12 for 3 days, surviving on vending machine coffee and whatever food I could grab from the gas station next door. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every conversation, every argument, every intimate moment from the rooms around me. It was like being trapped inside other people's lives while my own fell apart in spectacular fashion. The worst part was the waiting. Waiting for Clara to call and tell me she'd realized her mistake. Waiting for Mia to confess that she'd made the whole thing up. Waiting for some kind of sign that this nightmare would end and I could go back to my normal, boring, stable life. But the call never came. Instead, I got a visit from Detective Sarah Morrison on Thursday morning. She knocked on my door at exactly 9 a.m., dressed in a cheap suit and wearing the kind of expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Dorsey, I'm Detective Morrison with the Millfield Police Department. I'd like to ask you a few questions about some allegations that have been made against you." I invited her in, mainly because refusing would have looked suspicious. She sat in the room's only chair while I perched on the edge of the bed, trying to look like an innocent man instead of a guilty one hiding in a seedy motel. "I assume this is about Mia," I said. "Mia Patterson, yes. She's made some serious accusations, Mr. Dorsey. I need to hear your side of the story." Detective Morrison was professional, but not unkind. She asked about my relationship with Mia, my schedule, my whereabouts on specific dates. I answered every question honestly, even though I knew how pathetic I sounded. No, I couldn't prove I was asleep during the times Mia claimed I was in her room. No, there weren't any witnesses to my innocence. No, I didn't have any idea why she would make up such horrible lies. "Has Mia ever made false accusations before?" Morrison asked. "Not like this. But she's always been difficult. She lies about small things constantly. Homework, curfew, where she's been. Clara always makes excuses for her." "Can you give me specific examples?" I told her about the time Mia claimed I'd broken her laptop when she'd actually dropped it herself, about the lies she'd told to get out of trouble at school, always blaming teachers or other students for her problems, about the way she manipulated Clara by playing the victim whenever she didn't get her way. Morrison wrote everything down, but I could tell she wasn't impressed. Lying about homework was a far cry from fabricating sexual abuse, and we both knew it. "Mr. Dorsey, I have to ask, is there any truth to these allegations? Sometimes people make mistakes, cross boundaries without meaning to. If something happened, even something minor, it would be better to address it now." "Nothing happened," I said firmly. "I've never touched that girl inappropriately. I've never been alone with her for more than a few minutes at a time. I've never said or done anything that could be construed as sexual or threatening." Morrison studied my face for a long moment. "Okay. Well, the investigation is ongoing. I'd recommend you get a lawyer, just to be safe. And Mr. Dorsey, don't leave town." After she left, I sat in that dingy motel room and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I had maybe $3,000 in my personal checking account, enough to survive for a month if I was careful. My contracting business was essentially dead. Who was going to hire a guy accused of molesting his stepdaughter? Even if the charges were eventually dropped, the suspicion would linger forever. I needed allies, and I needed information. Most importantly, I needed to understand why Mia had decided to destroy my life. That's when I remembered Danny Walsh. Danny and I had been friends since high school, back when we were both young and stupid and thought we'd conquer the world together. He'd gone into plumbing while I'd chosen carpentry, and we'd often worked the same job sites over the years. More importantly, Danny was married to Linda Walsh, who taught at Millfield High School and had a front row seat to all the teenage drama that went on there. I found Danny at Murphy's Tavern that evening, nursing a beer and complaining about his latest customer to anyone who would listen. Murphy's was the kind of blue-collar bar where everyone knew everyone else's business, which made it either the best or worst place for me to show my face. I decided to risk it. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Danny said as I approached his table. "Heard you've been having some trouble at home." That's one way to put it. I signaled the bartender for a beer and sat down across from my oldest friend. "What exactly have you heard?" "Enough to know you're in deep shit, brother. Mia's been telling everyone who'll listen that you're some kind of predator. Clara's been crying at the grocery store, telling people she never saw the signs. It's a real soap opera." The beer arrived, and I took a long drink before responding. "None of it's true, Danny. You know me. You know I'm not capable of something like that." Danny leaned back in his chair and studied my face. We'd known each other for over 20 years, been through divorces and job losses and family deaths together. If anyone could see through lies, it was him. "Yeah, I know you," he said finally. "And you're right. You're not capable of hurting a kid. But that doesn't mean people are going to believe you. This town loves a good scandal, and you just gave them the juiciest one in years." "So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that my life is over?" "Hell no. You fight back, but you do it smart, not stupid." Danny leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Linda's been hearing things at school. Rumors about Mia that might interest you." "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that suggests your stepdaughter isn't quite the innocent victim she's pretending to be. But this isn't the place to talk about it. Too many ears." He finished his beer and stood up. "Come by the house tomorrow night. Linda's making pot roast, and we can have a real conversation." I wanted to press him for details, but Danny was right about the ears. Murphy's was already buzzing with whispered conversations, and I could feel eyes on me from every corner of the room. I finished my beer quickly and left, ignoring the stares and the sudden silence that followed my exit. Back at the motel, I lay awake staring at the water stain on the ceiling and thinking about Mia. She'd been 11 when I married Clara, a shy kid who seemed genuinely happy to have a father figure in her life. I'd taught her how to ride a bike, helped with her homework, attended every school play and soccer game. When had it gone wrong? When had I become the enemy? I thought about the changes I'd noticed over the past year, the way she'd started dressing differently, more provocatively, the late nights and the lies about where she'd been, the new friends Clara didn't approve of, the grades that had started slipping, the attitude that had grown progressively worse. Maybe there was more to this story than I'd realized. Maybe Mia's accusation wasn't just random cruelty. Maybe it was covering up something else entirely. The next evening, I drove to Danny and Linda's house in the older part of town, where the trees were bigger and the houses had character instead of just square footage. Linda met me at the door with a hug that lasted just a little too long, the kind that said she believed in my innocence even when the rest of the world didn't. "John, honey, you look terrible," she said, ushering me into their kitchen. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" I honestly can't remember. Linda was one of those naturally nurturing people who express love through food. Within minutes, I had a plate piled high with pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans in front of me, along with a glass of wine that probably cost more than my daily food budget. "So," Danny said once we were all seated around their dining room table, "let's talk about your situation." Linda glanced at her husband, then back at me. "John, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room, understand? I could lose my job if anyone found out I was sharing student information." I nodded, suddenly feeling more hopeful than I had in days. "Mia's been having problems at school," Linda continued. "Big problems. Her grades have dropped from B's to D's over the past semester. She's been cutting classes, getting into fights with other girls, and there have been incidents." "What kind of incidents?" 3 weeks ago, she was caught in the supply closet with Brandon Mitchell during lunch period. They were both half undressed, and from what I heard, it wasn't the first time. Brandon Mitchell. I knew that name. He was the kid who'd been coming around the house lately, the one Clara had forbidden Mia from seeing. Tall, cocky, 18 years old, and from what I'd observed, trouble with a capital T. "There's more," Linda said. "Last month, another teacher found inappropriate photos on Mia's phone. Pictures of herself that she'd been sharing with older boys, including some who've already graduated. The pieces were starting to come together in my mind. She's been sexually active. Very active, from what we can tell. And John, there's a rumor going around that she might be pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. That would explain everything, the lies, the accusations, the desperate need to find someone to blame. If she is pregnant, I said slowly, and she's been with Brandon Mitchell, then she needs a scapegoat, Danny finished. Someone to take the blame so her precious reputation doesn't get ruined, and you, my friend, are the perfect patsy. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, John. I know this is horrible for you, but if Mia is pregnant, and if she's been lying about who the father is, then you might have a way to prove your innocence. How? DNA test, Danny said simply. If she claims you got her pregnant, demand a paternity test. When it comes back negative, her whole story falls apart. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was close. If Mia had overplayed her hand, if she'd made claims that could be scientifically disproven, then maybe I had a fighting chance. There's something else, Linda said hesitantly. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Clara came to see me yesterday. She wanted to know if I thought you were capable of what Mia's accusing you of. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, that you're one of the most decent men I know, and that if Mia's making these accusations, there's probably more to the story than she's hearing. How did Clara react to that? Linda and Danny exchanged glances. Not well, Linda admitted. She got defensive, said I didn't understand because I don't have children. She seemed, I don't know, almost angry that I was questioning Mia's story. That stung, but it didn't surprise me. Clara had always been fiercely protective of Mia, sometimes to the point of irrationality. In her mind, supporting her daughter meant believing every word she said, regardless of evidence or logic. What do I do now? I asked. You get a lawyer, Danny said firmly. A good one. And you start building your defense, because something tells me this is going to get worse before it gets better. He was right, of course. But sitting there in their warm kitchen, surrounded by people who believed in my innocence, I felt stronger than I had since this nightmare began. Mia had made a mistake by involving pregnancy in her lies, and I was going to make sure that mistake destroyed her credibility completely. The war was just beginning. I hired Rebecca Santos on a Friday morning, using money I'd borrowed against my truck. She was the kind of lawyer who worked out of a converted house near the courthouse, the kind who took cases other attorneys wouldn't touch. More importantly, she was the kind who believed in fighting dirty when the situation called for it. Let me get this straight, Rebecca said, reviewing the notes I'd given her. Your 17-year-old stepdaughter claims you've been sexually abusing her and got her pregnant. Your wife believes her completely and has thrown you out of the house. The police are investigating, but haven't filed charges yet, and you think the girl is lying to cover up her relationship with her boyfriend. That's the simplified version, yes? Rebecca was in her 40s, with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from years of dealing with humanity's worst impulses. She'd handled 3 child abuse cases in the past year alone, which made her either the perfect choice or a terrible one, depending on your perspective. Here's what we're going to do, she said, pulling out a legal pad. First, we're going to demand a pregnancy test. If Mia is pregnant, we demand a DNA test immediately. If she's not pregnant, her credibility takes a major hit. What if she refuses? She can't refuse the pregnancy test if charges are filed. The DNA test is trickier, but we can make a lot of noise about it. Sometimes the threat is enough to make people back down. Rebecca spent the next hour outlining our strategy. We would investigate Mia's background, document her history of lying and manipulation, and build a timeline that would make her accusations impossible to believe. It was going to be expensive and time-consuming, but it was the only way to clear my name. I have to ask you this, John, Rebecca said as our meeting wound down. Is there any truth to these accusations? Any inappropriate contact? Any boundary crossing? Anything at all that could be misconstrued? Nothing, I said firmly. I've been careful to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. I've never been alone with her for extended periods, never entered her room without Clara present, never so much as hugged her without other people around. Good. That's going to help us. But I need you to understand something. Even if we prove your innocence beyond any doubt, some people will always believe you're guilty. That's the nature of these accusations. They stick to you forever. I left Rebecca's office feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in a week. I had a plan now, a way to fight back instead of just hiding in a motel room waiting for my life to end. My first stop was the Millfield High School parking lot at lunchtime. I sat in my truck across the street, watching students come and go, looking for Mia and Brandon Mitchell. It felt creepy and stalkerish, which I suppose it was, but I needed to see them together. I needed evidence of their relationship that I could use to support my theory. I didn't have to wait long. Mia emerged from the building with 2 other girls, laughing and talking like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked nothing like a traumatized victim of sexual abuse. She looked like a typical teenager, confident and carefree, enjoying the attention her accusations had brought her. Brandon appeared a few minutes later, and I watched as he and Mia had what appeared to be an intense conversation near his car. Even from a distance, I could see the body language, the way she touched his arm, the way he leaned in close to whisper in her ear. These were not the actions of casual acquaintances. I took photos with my phone, though I wasn't sure how useful they would be. Rebecca had warned me about stalking laws and the importance of staying within legal boundaries. The last thing I needed was to get arrested for harassment on top of everything else. That evening, I drove to the other side of town to visit someone I'd been avoiding, my sister Jenny. She lived in a modest ranch house with her husband Mike and their 2 young kids, and she'd been calling me non-stop since news of the accusations had spread. Jenny met me at the door with tears in her eyes and a hug that nearly broke my ribs. "Johnny, I'm so sorry. I know this is all bullshit. Anyone who knows you knows you'd never hurt a child." "Thanks, Jen. I needed to hear that." Mike shook my hand and offered me a beer, but I could see the questions in his eyes. He wanted to believe in my innocence, but doubt was a hard thing to shake once it took root. "What are you going to do?" Jenny asked as we sat in their living room, speaking in whispers so the kids wouldn't hear. "Fight it. I hired a lawyer, and we're going to prove that Mia's lying." "How?" I told them about the pregnancy angle, about Brandon Mitchell, about Linda's information from the school. Jenny listened with growing anger, while Mike just looked troubled. "That little bitch," Jenny said when I finished. "I never liked her. There was always something off about that kid, something calculating." "Jen," Mike warned, "she's still just a teenager. A teenager who's trying to destroy my brother's life with lies." Jenny's voice was getting louder, and I could hear one of the kids moving around upstairs. "Keep it down," I said. "The last thing I need is for this conversation to get back to Clara somehow." We talked for another hour, with Jenny offering to do anything she could to help, and Mike providing the voice of caution. When I left, I felt better about having family support, but I also felt the weight of how much I was asking them to risk by believing in me. The next few days blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, private investigator consultations, and long hours spent documenting every interaction I'd ever had with Mia. Rebecca had hired a PI named Marcus Torres, a former cop who specialized in family cases. He was expensive, but he was good at finding dirt on people who thought they were untouchable. "I've been digging into Mia Patterson's social media," Marcus told me during our first meeting. "The girl's been living a double life. Her public...
You cheated on me! You betrayed me! You destroyed our family!
Yes, I cheated! And you're the one to blame! You were never there for me! We're divorcing!
You get nothing! The house is mine! The money is mine! You'll live on the street! What?
Want to know who I cheated with? Your boss! He's a real man!
You're finished! I'll make sure you get nothing! You hear me? Nothing!
I don't need your money. I'm leaving you for him. He's twice the man you are. And you know what else?
Profiles are all sweetness and light, but her private accounts tell a different story. He showed me printouts of Instagram messages, Snapchat photos, and text conversations that painted a picture of a sexually active teenager with multiple partners. There were references to parties, drinking, and what appeared to be drug use. Most importantly, there were several conversations with Brandon Mitchell that were explicitly sexual in nature. "This one's from 2 weeks ago," Marcus said, pointing to a text exchange. "She's telling him she's late and asking what they should do. He's trying to convince her to take a pregnancy test." So she is pregnant. Or at least thinks she might be. But here's the interesting part. Look at this message from 3 days later. The text was from Mia to Brandon. "Don't worry, I figured out how to handle it. My stepdad's going to take the blame for everything. Mom will never suspect it was you." I stared at the words on the page, feeling a mixture of vindication and rage. Here was proof, in black and white, that Mia had planned this entire scheme. She'd deliberately chosen me as her scapegoat, knowing that Clara would believe her without question. "Can we use this in court?" I asked. "Depends on how we obtained it," Marcus said carefully. "Some of this information came from sources that might not be admissible, but it gives us a roadmap for building your defense." Rebecca was thrilled when I showed her Marcus's findings. "This changes everything," she said. "We can demand that pregnancy test now, and when it comes back positive, we demand DNA testing. When that proves you're not the father, Mia's entire story falls apart. What if she claims I abused her but didn't get her pregnant? Then we use her own words against her. She specifically told your wife that you got her pregnant. If we can prove that's a lie, it casts doubt on everything else she said. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they were finally moving in my direction. Rebecca filed motions demanding medical testing, while Marcus continued his investigation into Mia's background. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. I'd found a small apartment on the outskirts of town, a one-bedroom place that was clean and cheap and anonymous. I'd also managed to pick up some handyman work through word of mouth, mostly from people who either didn't know about the accusations or didn't care. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive. The hardest part was the isolation. Friends who'd known me for years suddenly became unavailable when I called. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Even at Murphy's Tavern, conversation stopped when I walked in, replaced by uncomfortable silence and suspicious stares. But there were exceptions. Danny and Linda remained loyal, as did my sister Jenny. A few of my former customers reached out quietly to offer support, and my old boss at the construction company made it clear that there would be a job waiting for me when this was all over. Innocent until proven guilty, he told me over the phone. That still means something to some of us. 3 weeks into the investigation, Rebecca called with news. The court has ordered Mia to submit to a pregnancy test, she said. It's scheduled for tomorrow morning. What if she refuses? She can't. The judge made it clear that refusal would result in contempt charges. Clara's not happy about it, but she's agreed to bring Mia in. That night, I barely slept. Everything depended on the results of that test. If Mia wasn't pregnant, it would be her word against mine, and in cases like that, the accused rarely won. But if she was pregnant, and if DNA testing proved I wasn't the father, then I had a real chance at clearing my name. The call came at 2 o'clock the next afternoon. She's pregnant, Rebecca said without preamble, approximately 6 weeks along. Thank God, I breathed. Don't celebrate yet. Clara's claiming that the timing fits with when Mia says you abused her. But we've got the DNA motion filed, and the judge is inclined to grant it. We should have results within a week. That week was the longest of my life. I went through the motions of working and eating and sleeping, but all I could think about was that DNA test. My entire future hinged on the results of a scientific procedure that would either prove my innocence or confirm my guilt in the eyes of the law. Rebecca called on a Thursday morning with the results. Congratulations, John, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You are definitely not the father. I sat down hard on my couch, feeling like someone had just lifted a 1,000-pound weight off my chest. It's over? Not quite. We still need to deal with the abuse allegations. But Mia's credibility just took a massive hit. She specifically told multiple people that you got her pregnant, and we can now prove that's impossible. What happens next? Now we go on the offensive. I'm calling a press conference for tomorrow morning. We're going to release the DNA results and demand that the district attorney drop all potential charges. More importantly, we're going to demand that Mia face consequences for making false accusations. The press conference was held on the courthouse steps, with Rebecca doing most of the talking, while I stood beside her trying to look dignified rather than vindictive. The local media was there in force, along with a small crowd of onlookers that included several people I recognized from around town. My client has been the victim of a malicious and calculated campaign of lies, Rebecca announced. The DNA evidence proves conclusively that he could not have fathered his stepdaughter's child, despite her specific claims to the contrary. We call on the district attorney to immediately drop this investigation and to pursue charges against Mia Patterson for filing a false report. The questions came fast and furious. Was I planning to sue? Would I be seeking custody of any assets from my marriage? Did I have any comment about my stepdaughter's motivations? I kept my answers short and dignified, but inside I was seething. Mia had tried to destroy my life for no reason other than her own convenience, and now she was going to face the consequences. That evening, Danny called with an update from the local gossip network. Clara's in full damage control mode, he reported. She's telling everyone who'll listen that Mia must have been confused, that the trauma made her mix up the details. She's still insisting that you abused her daughter, just that you're not the father of the baby. And people are buying that? Some are, but a lot of folks are starting to ask uncomfortable questions, like why Mia would lie about something so specific, and what else she might have lied about. The tide was turning, slowly but surely. It wasn't complete vindication yet, but it was a start. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I was beginning to believe that I might actually get my life back. But I was also beginning to realize that getting my life back wasn't going to be enough. Mia had tried to destroy me, and Clara had been all too willing to believe the worst about her husband. They were going to pay for what they'd done to me. I was going to make sure of it. The charges were officially dropped on a Tuesday morning in late October. District Attorney Patricia Walsh called it insufficient evidence to proceed, which was political speak for, the case fell apart when we proved the key witness was lying. I should have felt relieved, vindicated, free. Instead, I felt angry. Angry that it had taken 2 months to clear my name of something I'd never done. Angry that I'd lost my home, my marriage, and my reputation over a teenager's lies. Angry that Clara had been so quick to believe the worst about me and so slow to admit she'd been wrong. But mostly, I was angry that Mia was going to get away with it. The DA's not going to file charges against her, Rebecca told me after the official announcement. They say she's a minor, and that pursuing false report charges would discourage other victims from coming forward. So she destroys my life and faces no consequences? Legal consequences, no. But social consequences. That's a different story. Word's getting around town about what really happened. People are talking. Rebecca was right about that. The DNA results had been front-page news in the Millfield Gazette, and the story had spread through social media like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone who'd been so quick to condemn me was backpedaling, claiming they'd always had doubts about Mia's story. It was too little, too late. But it was something. I'd been staying away from my old neighborhood, partly to avoid violating the restraining order that was still technically in effect, and partly because I wasn't ready to face Clara yet. But 3 days after the charges were dropped, she called me. "John, it's me. We need to talk." Her voice was different, smaller, less certain than I remembered. The supreme confidence that had carried her through our marriage and my exile had been replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "I don't think that's a good idea, Clara. Your restraining order is still active. I'm dropping it. I already talked to my lawyer. Please, John. I know I owe you an explanation." We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, neutral territory where neither of us would have the advantage of familiarity. Clara looked terrible, thinner than she'd been 2 months ago, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of pallor that came from too much stress and not enough sleep. "You look good," she said as I sat down across from her. Healthier than I expected. I didn't return the compliment. "What do you want, Clara?" "I want to apologize. I want to explain why I believed her so quickly." "I'm listening." Clara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. "Mia came to me crying, John. She was so convincing, so detailed about what had supposedly happened, and I had my own reasons for wanting to believe her." "What reasons?" "Our marriage was falling apart, had been for months, maybe years. We both knew it, but neither of us wanted to admit it. When Mia made her accusations, it gave me a way out that didn't make me the bad guy. The honesty was surprising and more painful than I'd expected. So you threw me under the bus to avoid dealing with our problems." "Yes," she said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Where's Mia now?" She's not living with me anymore. After the DNA results came out, we had a fight, a bad one. She admitted that she'd lied about you being the father, but she still insisted that you'd abused her. When I pressed her for details, her story started falling apart. "So you finally realized she was lying." "I realized that I'd destroyed my marriage and ruined your life based on the word of a teenager who lies as easily as she breathes." Clara's voice broke slightly. "She's staying with my mother now. I can't look at her right now." I should have felt sympathy for Clara. She was clearly suffering, clearly remorseful about her role in this disaster. But all I felt was a cold satisfaction that she was finally facing the consequences of her choices. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to make this right. I want us to try again, to rebuild what we had." "We can't rebuild something that was never real in the first place." Clara flinched like I'd slapped her. "It was real, John. Maybe not at the end, but it was real once." "Was it? Because looking back, I'm not sure you ever trusted me. You always kept me at arm's length when it came to Mia, always assumed the worst about my motives. Maybe you were just waiting for an excuse to get rid of me." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You believed her accusation without asking for proof, without giving me a chance to defend myself. You had your brothers beat me up and throw me out like garbage. You filed a restraining order to make sure I couldn't even try to explain my side. That doesn't sound like the behavior of someone who loves and trusts their husband." Clara was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away discreetly. "I was scared, John. I was scared and confused, and I made terrible decisions. But I love you. I've always loved you." "No," I said, standing up. "You love the idea of me. The stable provider, the handyman who could fix your problems, the father figure for your daughter, but you never loved me enough to believe in me when it mattered most. Please don't leave. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything, Clara. We're done. We were done the moment you chose to believe her lies over my truth. I left her sitting in that coffee shop, crying into her lukewarm coffee, and I felt no pity for her at all. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. But I wasn't done with either of them yet. Marcus Torres had continued his investigation even after the charges were dropped, partly because I was still paying him, and partly because he'd developed a personal interest in the case. He'd seen too many lives destroyed by false accusations, and he wanted to make sure Mia faced some kind of consequences for her actions. I've been tracking her social media activity, he told me during our meeting the following week. She's been bragging to her friends about how she got rid of the creepy stepdad. She actually thinks she won. What else have you found? Plenty. Drug use, underage drinking, sexual activity with multiple partners. She's also been shoplifting from stores in the mall, and there's evidence she's been selling stolen merchandise online. Enough to get her arrested? Probably. But here's the interesting part. She's been doing most of this stuff with Brandon Mitchell, the baby's father. He's 18 now, which makes some of their activities illegal on his part. A plan was starting to form in my mind. Mia thought she'd won, thought she'd successfully destroyed my life without facing any consequences. She was wrong. Keep digging, I told Marcus. I want everything you can find on both of them. Every crime, every lie, every stupid decision they've made. What are you planning, John? Justice, I said simply. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus compiled a comprehensive dossier on Mia and Brandon's activities. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos of underage drinking, text messages discussing drug deals, video evidence of shoplifting, and most damaging of all, explicit communications between an 18-year-old Brandon and a 17-year-old Mia that could constitute statutory rape in our state. I took the evidence to Rebecca first. Can we use this? Legally? Some of it. But John, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? These kids are going to face serious consequences if this information gets out. Good. Mia tried to send me to prison for something I didn't do. Now it's her turn to face the justice system. And Brandon? He's guilty of poor judgment and statutory rape, but he didn't make the false accusations. He's guilty of getting a minor pregnant and then helping her frame an innocent man. That makes him complicit, in my opinion. Rebecca studied the evidence for a long time before speaking. I can't be involved in this, John. Ethically, I can't help you destroy these kids' lives, even if they deserve it. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to tell me if any of this evidence was obtained illegally. Most of it came from public social media posts or from sources who provided information voluntarily. It should be admissible if charges are filed. That was all I needed to know. My first stop was the Millfield Police Department, where I requested a meeting with Detective Morrison. She listened politely as I presented the evidence of Mia's criminal activities, though I could tell she wasn't thrilled about reopening anything related to my case. Mr. Dorsey, I understand you're angry about what happened, but pursuing charges against a minor for shoplifting and underage drinking seems vindictive. What about the false accusations? What about the fact that she tried to send an innocent man to prison? The DA already declined to prosecute on that. Then what about Brandon Mitchell? He's 18, and he's been having sexual relations with a minor. That's statutory rape in this state. Morrison's expression changed as she reviewed the evidence of Brandon and Mia's relationship. These text messages, when were they sent? Over the past 6 months. He turned 18 in March. She's still 17. The law's pretty clear on this. I'll need to review this with the DA's office. My second stop was Millfield High School, where I requested a meeting with Principal Davidson. I presented him with evidence of Mia's drug use, drinking, and shoplifting activities, all of which violated the school's code of conduct. Mr. Dorsey, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I have to question your motives here. My motives are irrelevant. A student at your school has been engaging in illegal activities and making false accusations against adults. That seems like something you'd want to address. Principal Davidson couldn't argue with that logic. Within a week, Mia had been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. But I wasn't done yet. My final stop was the most satisfying. I called the Millfield Gazette and requested a meeting with their investigative reporter, Janet Mills. She'd covered my case from the beginning, and I knew she'd be interested in the follow-up story. So let me get this straight, Janet said as she reviewed the evidence. The girl who falsely accused you of sexual abuse has been engaging in criminal activities and lying about it to cover up her relationship with the actual father of her child? That's exactly right, and I think the public has a right to know the truth about what really happened. This is going to destroy her reputation. Good. She tried to destroy mine with lies. Now she can face the consequences of the truth. The story ran on the front page of the Sunday edition, complete with photos and excerpts from social media posts. The headline read, "False Accusers' Secret Life Exposed." It detailed Mia's criminal activities, her relationship with Brandon, and the timeline that proved her accusations against me had been fabricated to cover up her pregnancy. The reaction was swift and brutal. Within hours of the paper hitting newsstands, Mia's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Brandon was arrested on statutory rape charges. Clara was forced to take leave from her job due to the scandal. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later, when I received a phone call from Clara's mother. "John, you need to stop this," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Mia is just a child. She made a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed. "She tried to send me to prison for 20 years. That's not a mistake. That's attempted murder by proxy. She's in the hospital now. She tried to. She hurt herself. The stress of everything that's happening." For a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt, but then I remembered the 2 months I'd spent living in a motel, the friends who'd abandoned me, the career that had been destroyed by her lies. "That's unfortunate," I said, "but it's not my responsibility. She created this situation with her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences." "You're a monster." "No," I replied. "I'm just a man who refuses to be a victim anymore." I hung up the phone and poured myself a drink. Outside my apartment window, I could see the lights of Millfield spread out below me. Somewhere out there, Clara was dealing with the wreckage of her family. Somewhere out there, Mia was learning that actions have consequences. Somewhere out there, Brandon was sitting in a jail cell contemplating his future. And here I was, finally free of all of them. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I married Clara 8 years ago, but it was the ending they'd earned through their choices. Justice, it turned out, tasted better than I'd expected. 6 months after the charges were dropped, I was rebuilding my life one careful step at a time. The contracting work had picked up as word spread about my innocence, and I'd managed to move into a better apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and nobody could take it away from me based on the lies of a manipulative teenager. The legal system had finally caught up with Mia and Brandon. He'd pled guilty to statutory rape and received 2 years probation plus mandatory registration as a sex offender. Mia had been charged as a juvenile for the shoplifting and drug possession, receiving community service and mandatory counseling. The false accusation charges had been dropped as part of a plea deal, which still rankled, but at least there were some consequences. Clara had lost her job at the insurance company after the scandal broke. Apparently, having your daughter make false abuse allegations against your husband wasn't the kind of publicity they wanted associated with their brand. She'd moved back in with her mother and was working part-time at a retail store, a dramatic fall from her previous position as a senior manager. I should have felt satisfied with how everything had turned out. The truth had been revealed, justice had been served, and the people who'd tried to destroy my life were facing consequences for their actions. But satisfaction wasn't what I felt when I saw Clara at the grocery store on a Thursday evening in March. She looked older, worn down by the events of the past year. Her hair was shorter and grayer, her clothes less expensive than what she used to wear. She was pushing a cart through the produce section, examining apples with the kind of careful attention that suggested money was now a consideration in her shopping decisions. She saw me watching her and froze, her hand suspended over a bag of oranges. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the produce display, two people who'd once shared a bed and a life, and now were strangers connected only by the wreckage of our past. "Hello, John," she said finally. "Clara." I nodded politely, but didn't approach. There was nothing left to say between us, nothing that could bridge the gap that had opened up the day she chose to believe Mia's lies over my truth. "You look good," she said, and there was something wistful in her voice. "Healthy." "I am. How's Mia?" Clara's face tightened. She's getting help, counseling. The baby's due in 2 months. And Brandon? He's not in the picture anymore. His parents made it clear that he wasn't welcome around Mia after everything that came out. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the 2 months I'd spent in exile, the friends I'd lost, the reputation I'd had to rebuild from scratch. My sympathy had limits, and Clara had exhausted hers long ago. "I should go," I said. "John, wait." She took a step toward me, then stopped when she saw my expression. "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for believing her, but for everything. For the way our marriage ended, for the way I treated you, for all of it. I know you're sorry, Clara, but sorry doesn't fix anything. I know, I needed to say it." I nodded and walked away, leaving her standing there among the fruit and vegetables, a woman who'd lost everything because she'd chosen loyalty to a liar over faith in her husband. I didn't look back, but the encounter stayed with me as I drove home, and I found myself thinking about the cost of revenge. I'd gotten what I wanted. Mia and Brandon had faced consequences for their actions. Clara had lost her comfortable life, and everyone in town knew the truth about what had really happened, but none of it had given me back what I'd lost. My marriage was still over, my trust in people was still shattered, and I was still essentially starting my life over at 45 years old. The phone was ringing when I got back to my apartment. It was Jenny, calling with her weekly check-in. "How are you holding up, Johnny?" "I'm fine. Saw Clara at the store today." "How was that?" "Awkward." She apologized again. "Do you think she means it?" I considered the question. "Yeah, I think she does. But it doesn't matter. Some things can't be fixed with an apology." "Have you thought about dating again?" "Maybe it's time to move on." "I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but not now." "You can't let what happened with Clara and Mia poison you against all relationships, John. There are good people out there." "I know, but right now I'm focused on rebuilding my business and my life. Romance can wait." After I hung up with Jenny, I sat in my living room and thought about the future. For the first time in over a year, I had one. I had work, I had a place to live, I had my reputation back. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I could build on. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was getting ready for work when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Mia standing in the hallway, heavily pregnant and looking nervous. "Hello, John." "What are you doing here, Mia?" "I wanted to talk to you, to apologize." I stepped back and gestured for her to come in, more out of curiosity than courtesy. She waddled into my living room and sat down heavily on my couch, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "You look like you're about to pop," I observed. 2 weeks to go, according to the doctor." She looked around my apartment, taking in the sparse furnishings and the complete absence of anything that had once belonged to our shared household. "This is nice. Small, but nice." "It's temporary. I'm looking for a house to buy." "That's good. You always were happier when you had projects to work on." The small talk felt surreal. Here was the girl who'd tried to destroy my life, sitting in my living room making conversation like we were old friends catching up. "Why are you here, Mia?" She took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize for what I did to you. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." "Okay, you've said it." "I was scared," she continued, "and when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I knew Mom would be furious, and I knew Brandon would probably bail on me. I needed someone to blame, someone who couldn't fight back effectively. And you chose me. You were convenient. Mom already didn't trust you around me, and I knew she'd believe me without question. I thought you'd just leave town quietly, and that would be the end of it. Instead, I fought back." "Yeah, I didn't expect that." She shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "I didn't think about what it would do to you, how it would destroy your life. I was only thinking about myself." "That's always been your problem, Mia. You've never considered how your actions affect other people." "I know. The counselor says I have narcissistic tendencies, that I struggle with empathy and consequence evaluation." "Fancy words for being a selfish bitch." She flinched at the harsh language, but didn't argue. "I deserve that. I deserve worse than that." "Yes, you do." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us like a physical presence. "What's going to happen to you?" I asked finally. "I'm giving the baby up for adoption. There's a family in Portland who wants her. After that, I don't know. Finish high school, maybe try to get into college somewhere far away from here. Start over. Running away from your problems, that's very mature. What else am I supposed to do? Everyone in this town knows what I did. I can't rebuild my reputation here any more than you could have if you'd stayed." She had a point. Millfield was a small town with a long memory, and Mia would always be known as the girl who made false accusations. In a way, we were both victims of her lies, though she'd brought her consequences on herself while mine had been imposed by others. "I hope you learn from this," I said. "I hope you become a better person." "Me too." She struggled to her feet, one hand supporting her back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you proved I was lying. If you hadn't, I probably would have done something like this again to someone else." "Yeah, well, next time pick on someone your own size." She almost smiled at that. "There won't be a next time. I've learned my lesson. We'll see." I walked her to the door and watched as she made her way slowly down the hallway toward the elevator. She looked young and vulnerable and very alone, and for a moment I felt something that might have been pity. But then I remembered the 2 months I'd spent in a motel room, wondering if my life was over, and the feeling passed. Some people had to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. Mia was one of those people. 3 weeks later, I read in the local paper that she'd given birth to a daughter and placed her for adoption as planned. The brief article mentioned that both mother and baby were healthy and that Mia would be finishing her senior year through a correspondence program. There was no mention of Brandon or the circumstances surrounding the pregnancy. Clara called me that evening. "Did you see the paper?" "I saw it. How is she?" "Physically, she's fine. Emotionally, and it's going to take time. Giving up the baby was harder than she expected." "I'm sure it was." "John, I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear, but she really has changed. The counseling, the consequences of her actions, becoming a mother even briefly, it's all had an impact on her. She's not the same girl who made those accusations." "Good for her. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that some good has come out of all this pain." "Clara, I need you to understand something. I don't wish Mia ill, and I don't wish you ill. But I also don't care about your redemption stories or your family's healing process. You both made choices that nearly destroyed my life, and while I'm glad you're dealing with the consequences in a healthy way, it's not my responsibility to care about your progress." "I understand." "Do you? Because you keep calling me, keep trying to maintain some kind of connection. We don't have a connection anymore. We're strangers who used to be married. That's it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You're right," Clara said finally. "I'll stop calling. Thank you. Goodbye, John. Goodbye, Clara." I hung up the phone and realized that I felt lighter somehow, like a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. For over a year, I'd been defined by what had happened to me, by the lies that had been told about me, by the injustice I'd suffered. But now, finally, I was ready to be defined by what came next. I opened my laptop and started browsing real estate listings. It was time to buy that house. Time to put down roots again, time to build something new from the ashes of my old life. The past was finished. The future was waiting. 6 months later, I was standing in the backyard of my new house, a modest 3-bedroom colonial that needed work but had good bones. I'd spent the morning installing a new deck, and I was admiring my handiwork when my neighbor came over to introduce himself. "Nice work," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Chen. My wife and I live next door." "John Dorsey. Thanks. I do this kind of thing for a living." "Contractor?" "Among other things. Handyman, carpenter, whatever needs doing." We talked for a few minutes about the neighborhood, the local schools, the best places to get coffee and groceries. David seemed like a decent guy, the kind of neighbor who'd lend you tools and help you move furniture. "We're having a barbecue this weekend," he said as he prepared to leave. "Nothing fancy, just some friends and neighbors. You should come by, meet some people." "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not much of a party person these days." "Fair enough. But the invitation stands if you change your mind." After he left, I sat on my new deck and thought about his offer. For over a year, I'd been isolated, suspicious of new people and new relationships. It had been necessary for my survival, but maybe it was time to start opening up again. Maybe it was time to stop being defined by what had been done to me and start being defined by what I chose to do next. I pulled out my phone and called David. "About that barbecue," I said when he answered. "What time should I come over?" "Really, that's great. How about 6 o'clock Saturday?" "I'll be there." As I hung up the phone, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. Not the grim satisfaction I'd felt when Mia and Clara faced consequences for their actions, but genuine happiness about the possibility of new friendships and new experiences. The war was over. I'd won, but more importantly, I'd survived. And now, finally, I was ready to start living again.